Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Maybe I could say something a little bit more about it.
Okay.
Are we going to do that now? Yeah.
We're going to go around saying names of this thing.
Okay. Yeah.
You want short responses since we have a lot of people here.
One thing I want to say is that I actually think it's really great for a group like this to take a little time to actually speak. My own experience was that I came to Buddhist groups like this where there was somebody giving a Dharma talk and kind of come together in silence and kind of hear a talk and then leave. And I think it's really important to build Sangha, to build community. And I know that you guys do that, and I think that this check-in is a part of doing that. I'm going to talk today about the 5 spiritual faculties that the Buddha explained as the path to awakening. And the first one is faith. And I just want to say that faith is often for a lot of us kind of a touchy subject. And kind of connotates, blind belief or something like that. And, really saying that when we're talking about this and doing this check-in, it's just like, what was the thing that inspired us, that gave us some hope or belief or feeling that meditation would be good, useful, helpful, that would alleviate some of our confusion, our suffering, whatever brought us to the practice. So if you just reflect for a moment as we say our names and, say, what was that thing? Maybe it was a person, maybe you saw the Dalai Lama and you said, oh, this meditation stuff, maybe I should do it. Or maybe somebody, a friend, a spontaneous experience. A lot of people, acid trip or something. And, they said, oh, well, there's another realm here. I better explore it in meditation. So whatever that was for you. So just our names and a one-liner, kind of like a friend I, had faith in, or a teacher, or a personal experience.
You want to give us your one line first?
Sure. So I'm Noah. And it was my father. I was suffering and he said, try meditation, and I had faith in him. That it, an inkling that it would help. And I tried it. And it worked.
I'm Bob, and it was also my father who was a beatnik and had friends who practiced Zen and who also had books around the house by the beach.
My name is Chris, and I took the first entry level of Buddhist lesson last September in Buddha Gate, a monastery in Lafayette, and I found it very helpful. And I took that for 10 weeks, Saturday lessons. So.
What's your name? We'll go around this.
I'm Rob, and I have a couple of friends who have meditated and found it beneficial.
My name is Neil, and I just try to get the environment so I can meditate with a group, so I can get into the deep state of the mind.
My name is Mike, and of all things, I read an article by Alan Watts in Playboy called Wealth versus Money, which led me to read Psychotherapy East and West, and lots of other things. And I think, by the way, it was Alan Watts who cleared up the idea of belief and faith. Belief is belief in something, but he said faith is letting go. So.
I'm George. It was Watts for me too, and more than anything, it was a feeling of familiarity of what he was saying and stuff that I realized I already knew. He was bringing it up.
My name is Baruch, and beneficial effects of meditation and insomnia problems.
My name is Frank, and a friend of my church actually got me started. Was teaching a class which made some good movies. Found that it was really helpful, different kind of spirituality.
My name is Hubbard, and it was during the Vietnam War when I saw Buddhist monks douse themselves in gasoline and burn up, and I said, "What's that?" And then it was taken on.
My name is Kay, and I first became a vegetarian, and then that's what led me to be interested in Buddhism exactly.
My name is Carl, and it started for me back in college. I learned transcendental meditation with the Maharishi, Mahesh Yogi, and that was sort of the seed. And then many years later, I would meditate off and on, but then just got more into it. Picked up a book by Jack Kornfield, went to a 4-day session with your dad too, and just got more into it.
My name's Michael. I hit bottom, and my sister rescued me and brought me to Mount Madonna. And that was the beginning of my life.
My name is Roger, and I read the book Goal Buddhism by Christopher Humphreys in the Penguin series, which is a most misleading book. So, but I did find that it made me, it seemed to remind me of something, the previous life, which I think may actually be Taoism. So I was wrong the last time when I was a Chinese Taoist maybe, and so as a consequence I was reborn in England. And then I have been trying to get it right ever since.
My name's Eric. I don't really know specifically what sparked my interest in Buddhism in general, but the main thing that draws me to it is the practicality and the simple logic and the simple wisdom.
My name is Bill, and Rolf Anderson brought me here. I worked with him and saw his direct, honest approach to a lot of things, and I thought I would check it out.
Hi, my name is Barbara, and actually had a case manager introduce me to Buddhism alongside recovery work that I was doing, and it really opened up some new ways of thinking for me, and it helped me a lot.
That's the these two people.
My name is John, and I actually sort of avoided Buddhism for many years, and I studied and practiced Hinduism for a long time, and a lot of bhakti yoga, which is very attractive to me. But then very recently I was introduced to Pema Chodron, and I've been eating up her books like crazy. About a week ago, someone gave me a beautiful green Tara, and now I found myself here. So, I don't know.
My name is Sari, and I was fortunate enough to not ever grow up with a preconceived notion of God. And so I always felt that I had my own natural kind of intuitive sense of it. And then as little drifts of Buddhism came toward me, it resonated with me. But it wasn't until I got into recovery and actually did a couple-year-long workshop with using the works of Marsha Lanahan, who bases a lot of her work on mindfulness and a lot of the Buddhist principles, that I began to get more involved in what Buddhism is actually about.
My name is Ed, and first started on the path of meditation in 1980 through Swami Mutananda and the very powerful experiences I had with him. And I've sort of reached the path I am now just by listening to my dreams.
I'm Steve, and a few years ago I turned 50 and got sober and left the church. So that created a lot of vacancies.
My name is Bob. I don't know if I have an answer to the question. It's a long time wondering what is it really all about. As I've gotten older, it seems to have increasing meaning, and perhaps a couple early books by Suzuki and Watts were the interest.
I'm Snake, and I guess the search for a spirituality that would make me feel okay with my sexuality was what fueled my search.
Hard. I was born with faith, thus it existed before my birth, thus it's part of me.
My name's Paul, and I went shopping for religions after I had stopped practicing Catholicism. And actually, a psychoanalyst, Ernie Isaacs, said, why don't you go to beginning meditation?
My name is David, and I'm another beginner with Dharma Punx some years ago. And I just sort of practice a smorgasbord of various religions.
My name is Clint, and I would say it was many years ago I asked for the Golden Gate Mark. And after that, it was just looking for a non-homophobic spiritual path.
I'm Ronaldo, and just enough suffering and a great coincidence.
My name is Jim. I'm a yoga teacher, and I slowly discovered yoga was preparation for meditation. Through it, it just startled me one day doing lots of yoga that yoga was a practice of dedication. And dedicated to what sort of just appeared to me as faith eventually.
I'm Carl, and I was brought in mainly through friends with whom I had faith. And the Buddhist philosophy resonates with my intuitive intellect.
Did we miss anybody? Everybody's name jumped in.
Let me introduce Noah Levine. He has a Wednesday night group. I think several people here have been to it at the Cultural Integration Fellowship Hall in Fulton. And he's a teacher in training with Jack Kornfield at Spirit Rock Meditation Center, and also teaches meditation in juvenile halls in the San Quentin. He's the author of Dharma Punx, a personal memoir that recounts his life's transition from street punk drug addict to recovering addict and Buddhist practitioner, and he's working on a second book.
Thank you. And it's nice to be back and get to spend some time with you this morning. Will you give me kind of a 5-minute warning or so? What time do we go to? 12? What time is it now?
11:20.
Okay, so we have some time. And so, good morning. I think it's just a really interesting question, and the reason, we talked about this is because I am going to speak about, what the Buddha said were these 5 spiritual faculties or spiritual powers that he reflected on. And he said, how did I come to this awakening? And this comes in the suttas and the scriptures. Before actually he taught the Four Noble Truths, after his experience of enlightenment underneath the tree, and then he hung out for several days before going out and finding his friends and beginning to teach the Dharma, what's called, putting the wheel of the Buddha Dharma in motion. And so this actually comes out of a place of when later he recounted his experience. He said, this is, for me, I saw that first thing for me, the first thing to get me onto the spiritual path was faith. And, and saying that I believe, that it feels like, we have to have faith in something in order to do it. If we don't have some sort of belief that it's going to work, then we won't do it. And And so I think it's just a really interesting question for each of us to reflect on. Where did that come from? Was it that I had, trusted someone else that seemed like they were happier than me or had found something that was working for them? And so I said, well, kind of like, I want what that person has, whether that was an inspirational teacher. Was that a spontaneous experience, like many people say? Just sort of this inner sense, feeling, tone that I just sort of knew that going inward, introspection would be useful. Where does that faith come from? In this Buddhist tradition where the Buddha says over and over and over, don't take my word for it. Don't believe me or my teachings. Find out for yourself if it's true. Points to the, truth that it's not about having faith in, certainly not in a statue or in a tradition or religious dogma. Really, he's pointing towards faith in our own direct experience, this verified faith. But often, in order to go inside, in order to kind of find out for ourselves, someone else, out there inspires us. Often. It's an inspirational teacher. Certainly, in the time of the Buddha, he's walking around and people were just kind of like seeing his radiance and, the spiritual power and kind of were just like, oh, wow, I want that. I want to get free from suffering. That sounds great. And so each of us has had that experience in our own way. And it's different for each of us. But it's been really useful for me to see, because I feel like I came to Buddhist practice with no faith, and total irreverence and doubt and, it was just like, no way. I grew up with it, as many of you know. My father was a Buddhist teacher and, spiritual practice around me my whole life, and I was just like, that shit doesn't make sense. How is sitting there not doing anything going to be helpful to anyone? Just didn't get it at all. And then for me it was this place of deep suffering and confusion and ignorance that brought me to a place of incarceration and addiction. And from that place of my way doesn't work, and the love and respect of my father and him saying this way does work. It might not make sense to you, but it'll help you get free from the confusion and suffering of your own mind and heart and body. And having some faith in him and saying oh, okay, I believe that on some level. I've got a lot of doubt, but there's something in here where I'll try it. Because I've tried everything else. Nothing else seemed to work very well. So I'll try this meditation practice. So that first step, for the Buddha, it was, that he grew up secluded in kind of pleasure gardens, and his parents were kind of trying to seclude him from the suffering of the world. And for him, that first faith was when what's called the heavenly messengers, when he escaped from his secluded palace and saw a sick person, an old person, and a dying person. And he saw oh, this is the truth of existence. We're all going to get sick, old, and die. We're all going to suffer. And then and he said, I don't want to do that, And this is also within this Hindu cosmology that says we don't do it one time. We do it over and over and over and over. And he says, I don't want to keep this cycle of birth and death. I don't want to keep suffering, incarnation after incarnation. And the thing that gave him faith was that he saw a spiritual wanderer. The fourth messenger, that's talked about, where he saw this person in robes with a begging bowl living this simple life and was told that's somebody who's trying to free themselves from this cycle. He's trying to get liberated and not continue this sickness, old age, suffering, death cycle. And so for him it was that, there's this other path. You don't have to just, work in the material world and accept, material pleasure and suffering as your life's experience. You can actually focus your life's energy on a spiritual path. And it was that wanderer who he never even spoke to. He just saw walking by. He said, I'm going to do that. That looks like a good option. The spiritual wandering business. And then just left his home and went out and sought teachers. But it was that first experience of faith that whatever that person has, I want to do that. And my own experience of having faith, there's this place, and I'm so glad, it's one of the things that connects me so deeply to Buddhism, of this question everything, question your teachers, don't take anybody's word for anything, find out for yourself. It's one of the things for me, being kind of an anti-authority type of person, that really endears me to the practice. But in my early practice, and I assume that other people here have had this experience, some level of this experience, where I had so much vigor, I was so kind of like, this is great, I found something that works. And I was a little blind in my faith, that I was just kind of like, oh, that person's spiritual, what can I learn from that person? And especially in these modern times, there's been so many spiritual teachers who've been very confused and who've ended up hurting their students quite a bit. And so I'm just pointing to the importance of a discerning faith and not a blind faith. Because I certainly went into one teacher-student relationship and put all of my faith into this man. And just really kind of like, he had it and I wanted it. And it really ended up breaking my heart when I found out actually how confused he was, and that he actually, had some wonderful wisdom and also had a lot of confusion too. And that confusion then spilt out onto our small community and, tore it apart, as spiritual communities tend to happen. Certainly has happened quite a bit in the kind of last 40 or 50 years here in the West. Almost every spiritual scene, there's kind of like, oh yeah, that teacher was sleeping with the students. Oh yeah, that teacher was taking money that they shouldn't have been. Oh, that teacher was an alcoholic, and that teacher was, this and that. So it's not so much from what I'm pointing to is faith in someone else. But sometimes it is that someone else that gives us faith in ourselves. And certainly my experience with that beginning faith and that blind faith and that heartbreak from betrayal within a spiritual community actually was what forced me to trust myself deeper. To trust the Buddha's wisdom of don't, have a guru and take a teaching on that level. You have to find out the truth for yourself. You have to go inward and find it within your own heart. That nobody can give it to you. So ultimately, this first step on the path is coming to that place of faith in our own deepest wisdom, our own ability, our Buddha nature, our own ability to wake up. So the second piece in this list of spiritual faculties is that from that level of faith or belief or inspiration of spiritual, attainment being possible, comes effort. That in order to apply effort to our spiritual practice, we have to have some faith that it's going to work. And then, so from that place of like, okay, this will work, gets verified, we sit down, we feel the breath coming and going, and saying, well, at least I'm not thinking. At least I have a moment relief from my crazy mind, and we have that verified experience. Or maybe we have a larger spiritual opening and a moment of seclusion from the hindrances and, of deep bliss or something like that. Sometimes we have those spontaneous experiences, and then we say like, well, okay, this is worthy of effort. This is worthy of my life's energy. And we see, like, we start meditating, we see, like, this isn't easy. This isn't just sitting here. This takes a lot of effort to train the mind to come back to the present over and over and over. And all the memories and fantasies and fears and, desires that our minds play. Wow, this takes a lot of work to come back. But I have faith that it's worth it. From my own experience, it's starting to alleviate some of my confusion. I'm suffering a little less. So I'm going to continue putting effort in this direction. And this was the Buddha's experience when he went and found these gurus and these teachers. And he got really concentrated doing these yogic, breathing and mantra. And he got so concentrated and, a lot of effort. And it worked to a certain level. And then he saw that actually when this concentration wears off, there's still confusion here. which was what drew him to the actual mindfulness, the present time, non-discriminating awareness practices. So this effort on the spiritual path, especially from a Buddhist perspective, is much more than the training of our minds and hearts in present time awareness. It's the effort and energy that it takes to, on some levels, the effort to renounce or let go of the things that we know are causing us suffering in our lives, not only on the meditation cushion, but in all aspects of our lives. And or to cultivate, the things that are bringing joy and compassion and love into our lives. So the spiritual effort, hopefully, we all know that we're not meditating to become good meditators, but that meditation is part of the formal aspect of our lives to allow us to live a more harmonious and skillful life. And so when we're talking about effort, it goes into all realms of our livelihood, of all of our actions of body and speech and mind. The effort to bring about wholesome results that lead to less suffering, more happiness, and alleviate the confusion and dissatisfaction that we experience. The Buddha explained this effort as being against the stream, saying that, because of the natural tendencies, the natural human tendencies towards attachment and aversion, through our almost physical, instinctual level of, if it's pleasant, we want more. If it's unpleasant, we want to get rid of it. Totally natural aspect of having a body and mind. And the Buddha says, actually the effort is to go against those instincts that push away and are aversive and hate anything unpleasant, and are greedy and grasping and lustful after everything that is pleasant. This is the Buddha's path, where it's like, actually it's about accepting, sometimes pleasant, sometimes unpleasant. If I meet the unpleasant with aversion, I create an unnecessary suffering for myself. If I grasp and try to attach to an impermanent or passing pleasant experience, I like this image of like when we try to hold on to something that's being pulled from our grasp. It's like rope burn, because it's everything. It's passing so quickly. When we try to hold on to it, it hurts. It's being pulled from our grasp. So this effort that goes against these natural instincts, and it's one of the reasons why the Buddha was hesitant to teach. So people aren't going to want to do this, sitting still and paying attention, letting go of pleasure, accepting pain as their spiritual path. People want bliss. People want to promise that I have this spiritual teaching that will make you blissful and full of pleasure forever. And the Buddha said, that's just not my experience. My experience is one of peace. And that peace includes pain and includes joy. The Chinese Buddhists say 10,000 sorrows, 10,000 joys. And that this path isn't one of like you're going to get blissed out forever. It's one of like coming to equanimity, to acceptance, and to caring, to compassion about our pain and the pain in the world. I get a little confused sometimes about this effort piece, about how come some of us have the ability to kind of long-term put in a lot of effort into our spiritual practices. Some of us don't. Where does that come from? Obviously, some of it comes from this first piece of faith. From a larger Buddhist perspective, it must come from karma, from our own past actions. But since I don't really understand or see my own past karma, it's sometimes hard to understand how come, like even in a scene like this, or in my recovering community or my spiritual communities, there's such a transient population. It doesn't seem like people come and stay with practice long term. Like you're going to hit a wall and then say, oh, that's enough effort. This stuff is really difficult. I have to actually face all of my unexplored grief, all of my unexplored greed, lust, fear. And people kind of give up often. And so I don't really know where that comes from, that willingness to continuously putting effort, even when it's not pleasant all the time. Even when we sit down and we're faced with all of our shit. And it's not so fun. Sometimes, it's very pleasant and you get peaceful. Sometimes it's not. Certainly in the long-term description of levels of spiritual awakening, the Buddha was really clear that it gets very difficult and it gets horrifying, when we begin to see the nature of life and death. And how many lifetimes, we've been doing this. And, just that everything that we love is passing constantly. So this piece about effort, one of the ways that I think about it is not a very Buddhist way, is grace. That, sometimes it feels like we have the grace to continue practicing, to put that effort in and to get our asses on the cushions and, onto retreats and, whatever our spiritual practice is, being of service in the world or, being engaged in good things, being able to be honest with ourselves and others, to be able to practice generosity, forgiveness, compassion. And that there's this way in which it just feels so mysterious to me that I just kind of give it up to this mysterious concept of grace. Something keeps me going. Something keeps that fire burning within me that says, yeah, this is worthy. I'm going to continue my practice, even though it's difficult a lot of the time. And the layers of the onion keep getting pulled back, and it keeps, kind of like, oh, okay, I'm in a good place. And then another level of healing comes to the surface. So this faith that gives us the effort to continue our practice. And then the next three are about the meditation practice, about being mindful, the mindfulness leading to concentration, and the concentrated mind being able to penetrate into wisdom and understanding. So this ability, mindfulness, being the thing that separates the Buddha's teaching from many of the Hindu practices of his time. The piece that says, pay attention to everything. See it as it is, as it arises and passes. Begin with the mindfulness of breath and body, observing this physical form as impermanent, that our bodies are going to die, that everything that we see, that we come in contact with, is here now and is changing, is in constant flux. This first foundation of Buddhist mindfulness practice is often only taught, and certainly my tradition, the Vipassana Theravadan tradition, is often guilty of this too, of teaching mindfulness of just mindfulness of the breath, or mindfulness of the body sensations. But within this sutta, where the Buddha outlines this mindfulness practice, there's a whole list of mindful body contemplations, and a lot of it is about our own impermanence, about our own mortality, and that this body isn't a refuge for us to keep. That this body is temporary, and it's actually suggested that we meditate on death on a daily basis, of just acknowledging, like, okay, this body is here, and this body will die. And actually, he suggests going to the graveyards and seeing, like, oh, just as this body has died, so will mine. To break some of our identification or misidentification with this physical form as being who we are. Beginning to come into contact with seeing that there's something else going on here other than this mind-body process. That there's another dimension, spiritual dimension. Applying that mindfulness not only to the contemplation of the physical form, but also to the feelings and emotions that arise in our consciousness. Of being mindful of, especially this feeling tone, of like, what happens when I'm having a pleasant experience? And applying that mindfulness to seeing directly, oh, when there's a pleasurable experience, there's a little bit of this attachment to it. I want more of that. Or a little bit of kind of this craving feeling. Oh, that's pleasant. I'll have another scoop, please. And paying attention to that, and then releasing that, beginning to let go of first acknowledging the attachment and the aversion through the mindfulness, and then beginning to relax into letting things arise and pass in their own natural way. And beginning to also take that perspective on our minds, seeing that our consciousness is so identified with our thoughts. And we think that we are, therefore we are, whatever that guy said. But beginning to bring the mindfulness, this awareness, in a more spacious way to see thoughts are arising and passing. I can choose to direct my energy and attention to those thoughts, or I can actually experience them as impermanent. And I can see that when I grasp, when I, obsess, the difficulty I cause for myself. Beginning to see even the mind, turning the attention on the mind. Now, when we begin to apply this effort to mindfulness practice, we experience these hindrances. When we begin to really say, okay, paying present time awareness attention is important to my life, to my spiritual practice. Then we begin to see I feel very agitated when I meditate. I get very tired or sleepy. It's hard for me to pay attention. There's all of this, strong desire for pleasant experience. There's all of this aversion or resistance to unpleasant experience. And or ultimately we start to believe our doubt. This huge hindrance of, our mind offers this doubt and we believe it. Saying I'm different. I can't do this. Or doubting the path itself. Oh no, this path isn't for me. There is a bit of, weird sexism philosophy here. I better throw out the meditation and everything else. And we start to believe our doubts. Rather than our own deep experience that says, actually, when I do this, it works. I've seen through my own direct, verified experience that this works. We each have to see that for ourselves. I assume that most of us have. So in that mindfulness, dealing with these hindrances that arise, whether it's sleepiness or restlessness, whether it's doubt or aversion, that's all part of this mindfulness practice. It's been really helpful to me to look and study the Buddhist teachings and see, and this actually isn't that popular of a Buddhist opinion, but it's my opinion. I might have even said it here last time because I've been speaking about it a lot. That these hindrances, these things, these difficulties that arise, whether it's lust or it's aversion or it's fear or it's anger or whatever, that there's a way in which sometimes we get this spiritual superego and we think there's something wrong with me if my mind is going into those places. I'm not being spiritual enough. But in the suttas, in the Buddha's life, this is called Mara. This is the tempter, the evil, king of death, Mara, coming at the Buddha, and saying here, there's all of these beautiful people for you to have sex with, temptation. And the Buddha saying, oh, that's just temptation. That's just physical craving, desire. And every time saying, I see you, Mara. I see you as the illusion that says, that will make me happy. Because I know that physical sensation won't make me happy. It'll be temporary pleasure. It won't be long-term liberation. Or the armies of Mara and the violence, saying I'm going to attack you, I'm going to kill you. And the Buddha, just saying oh, I see you. Anger, aversion, hatred. I see that tendency, that self-protective tendency within my mind. And every time the Buddha just saying, I see you. And after enlightenment, these maras, these hindrances, continuing to visit the Buddha. Now, many Buddhists would want to say, the enlightened Buddhist mind has no taints, has no hindrances, has no greed or hatred or delusion. The way that I understand my cotton mouth, the way that I understand, or see these suttas and these visitings of Mara after the Buddha's enlightenment, is that if you have a human mind, enlightened or unenlightened, greed is going to arise. The enlightened mind sees it, is unaffected, is not attached, is not averse. If you have a human mind, hatred, aversion, those things are natural. They're going to arise in your mind. The difference is When you're mindful, when you're aware, when you're attentive, you see it arising and don't believe it. My father talks about this of like big surprise. Oh, I'm angry again. Big surprise. Why did I think that I was going to never get angry again? I'm sad. I'm grieving. My friend died. There's a lot of sadness here. Big surprise. Why did I think that there's something wrong with that? Why do I think there's something wrong with me for having this natural human experience? Or I see you. Oh, okay, grief again. Welcome. I understand this to be the natural process. But there's something else within us, the superego maybe, if that's the right word, I don't know, that says, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm confused because this is happening. And I thought now I'm on this spiritual path, this wouldn't happen anymore. Where's the never-ending bliss? Why is there still this sadness and grief? Thank you.
Never-ending bliss.
So this mindfulness practice that the Buddha says, bringing present time awareness, liberates. Liberates our misidentification to the body, the feelings, the attachment, the aversion. And then through focusing on something like the breath or body, through doing what would be Vipassana practice, which is present time awareness of whatever is the predominant experience, the mind gets really concentrated. And as the mind gets concentrated, and focused, and we bring the attention in more and more, we begin to see really clearly the three aspects, the three truths. And I've already been pointing towards them quite a bit. But the concentrated mind has direct experience, direct insight into the nature of impermanence, the uncertainty of all things, the constant change. And of course we all know this. It's such common sense. Like so many people said, we like Buddhism because it's common sense. But there's a big difference between understanding constant change or impermanence and directly seeing it and experiencing it and living our lives from that place. Really having insight into arising and passing and impermanence means that we're not going to hold on anymore because we know it's passing. It's going to be a let go, a letting be, a letting things arise and pass. So the concentrated mind begins to see, everything is arising and passing. Anicca. Everything is arising and passing. Everything is uncertain. There's nothing certain, nothing solid, nothing separate and steady. It's all in flux. Everything. And because of that truth of impermanence, it's all passing, then we see and there's this suffering because of my resistance and lack of understanding of impermanence. Because I don't want things to change, I want things to stay, when they're good, I want them to stay like that, And, I don't want to get old and die, and I don't want my friends to die without even getting old. I don't, that lack of acceptance of the way things are and the change creates a lot of suffering for us. And so this truth of dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature of phenomena. Sometimes in Buddhism gets the bad rap of saying life is suffering. Not life is suffering. There is suffering in life. There is. And ultimately, the kind of ultimate aim of the concentrated mind is turning that consciousness back on itself, turning the awareness back on itself with this ultimate question of who's suffering here? Who is it? Am I these thoughts? Am I this body? Am I even this consciousness? This witness, this place that feels like I'm the one experiencing all of this. I've been the one, living this life in this body. Okay, maybe I understand I'm not this body. Maybe I understand I'm not this mind, but I'm at least the one witnessing it. So this is the place in the Buddha's Dharma where he says, find out for yourself, is that true? Who are you? Who are we? What is the nature of our self, of our consciousness? And that the mindfulness practice that will allow the mind to get concentrated, to give us a little bit of seclusion or protection from that doubt, from that restlessness, from that sleepiness, then the concentrated mind will be able to really see that minute detail directly out of our own experience of the impermanent nature of phenomena, the suffering, if there's any attachment or aversion, any grasping. And then, who's experiencing it? And you get to these subtler and subtler levels of seeing like, oh, it's just experiences experiencing themselves. There's no me experiencing any of this. It's mind knowing the mind. It's seeing, knowing seeing, tasting, smelling, feeling. Sensations. Phenomena. It's not me. It's just experiencing itself. Easy place to get confused. The place that I get confused a lot in Buddhism. Because I've only had really brief glimpses of this anatta. And so there's the philosophy of it and there's the direct experience of it. Philosophy, forget it. But for me, I have the faith that the practice will take me to that place. And I know that those glimpses are liberating. Those are places of freedom. And so it's like kind of having that intention to bring our lives in that direction in more congruence, concord with the way that things are. Not necessarily the way we want them to be. 5 minutes? Sorry. And so these are the faculties, that this concentrated, this one-pointedness leads to, just what I've been saying, this wisdom. And mostly this wisdom is into the three characteristics: impermanence, suffering, and the nature of self. But more than that, because of the great suffering, there's the flip side, which is the compassion, which is when we begin to see, how much confusion we've been in, how we've created a lot of this for ourselves, then the natural response is to care about that confusion, and to care about and seeing that it's universal, and to begin responding with love and kindness and understanding to ourselves and to everyone else that we come in contact with, to the best of our ability. Wisdom alone can be very dry. In Buddhism often it's talked about like there's one wing of wisdom, which is understanding, and there's another wing of compassion, which is love and caring. And having to bring this gentle, understanding, friendliness, I think is the best way to talk about it, to all of our spiritual practice. To be friendly towards ourselves, and this confused mind and this identified heart, and this, healing process. To be gentle and friendly with ourselves along the way. And to learn to be gentle and friendly with each other. And understanding that even the people that cause us pain are just confused people in pain themselves that cannot get free from it, and it spills out on us. Beginning to come from that place. I offer all of this again in my own, just as an offering for you to reflect upon. Don't believe anything that I say. Find out for yourself, reflect on it. Trust your own deepest wisdom, your own presence, mindfulness practice. We have to play with these teachings and find out what works and what doesn't work for us. So, thank you. And so if there is some time, if there's questions, if there's comments, please.
You mentioned superego, and it's just interesting because I haven't heard the concept used in Buddhism, but of course it's used in Western psychology, but I find it to be a major issue, not only for me, but for people I know. Mm-hmm. Can you go a little bit more of that? How does Buddhism deal with the assaults of superego and all these, like, what we should be doing versus what we are doing?
Right. So, from a Buddhist perspective, it's the judging mind. It's the critical mind. It's just an aspect of the deluded mind. We have this sort of term, it's, the place that's up here telling us, in our mind or whatever, that's telling us what's good and bad and, what we should be doing. The judging, the comparing, the criticizing. So what was the question? What does Buddhism tell us about working with that aspect of mind?
Personally,
right.
I struggle with it a lot.
Right.
And I know I'm not the only one and I just like to hear your thoughts.
So, the way that, I suffer from it a lot too. One of my experiences is that the more mindfulness of it, the more space, the less I believe it. It's Mara. And so, in the beginning, I believed all of it before I started practicing. Gradually over practicing, periods of years of practicing, my identification with it has loosened some. So now where it's kind of like, oh, I'm judging again. Certainly this technique of labeling it, of knowing, oh, this is a judgment. This is a comparison. This is, and investigating it on that level and noting it and naming it. And then for me, it's this attitude of like big surprise. I'm judging myself again. That's what my mind does. Do I have to believe it? Taking it to a level from that mindfulness in the mind, also to the body. Like, how does this feel in my body? My stomach is tight, when I'm judging myself, when I'm comparing, when I'm shooting all over myself. How does this feel physically? What happens if I relax that tension in the body? Sometimes it relaxes the tension in the mind. That physical mind-body connection.
Because I find it's a two-part process. Yeah. And that is not only just the judging voice, but it's the other part that accepts as true the judging voice.
Right.
If you didn't accept
that believes it.
Yeah, that believes it. If you didn't believe it, there wouldn't be an issue.
Right. So I think that's my experience, is that we begin to believe it less and less. Identify with it as being who we are less and less. And sometimes for me, therapy has been, really part of it, and kind of starting to see, like, that's not even my voice. That's my friend or my dad or, somebody else that I've internalized in there in my judging. If you really listen to it, oh, that's not even me. That's somebody else. That's not me. I believed that line, and now I've been telling it myself over and over. Most important, I think, is to be gentle and kind of see, like, oh, when I judge myself, this causes me pain. Can I react to that pain with care? Can I be gentle? Can I be loving towards this mind, that's so confused?
There's a question over
here. Please.
Hi. Thank you very much for your share. Really, I got a lot out of it, and then I got confused at the end. And
good.
So, what is it that, according to Buddhism, what is it that gets reborn, that dies and gets reborn? What is it that has compassion?
Great. So it's a great question. I don't have the answer. The Buddha didn't usually answer that question. He usually kind of said, it's not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. I don't know, honestly, so I can't really answer. What I did hear one teacher say is, what gets reborn are your bad habits.
Well, besides that.
And that's about it, that on this karmic level, that we have this tendency towards greed or hatred or aversion or whatever's going on there, and that it's that gets reborn if it's not let go of in this life, that goes to the next incarnation. And then what was the second part? And what feels compassion?
What is it that has compassion?
That has compassion.
You've said this many times in your talk, and I hear this again and again in Buddhism. I love this part of it. It's like
the caring.
What we should have is the caring, the loving kindness, the compassion.
You know what I think? I think that actually that's our true nature. I think that the greed and the hatred and the confusion is this layering over who we really are. And when you start to pull away that confusion, that the compassion, the love, the generosity, the friendliness, and the kindness is natural. Is just there. Is just, what this energy, essence, spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it, is. That's what I think. I think that that's totally natural. That it's not about cultivating or finding any of that stuff. It's about excavating, digging up all of that bullshit that we layered on top of that true nature, of that, illuminated heart, that wisdom, compassion, nature of our being. All that other stuff is on top of it, and you clear that away, and that's natural. That's there. It just is. Time.
Okay, thank you.
Ding.
Could we have announcements, please? George.
Yes, a reminder that these talks are available on the internet at the GBF website, buddhist.org.
Yes.
The Spirit Rock lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender 5-night silent retreat is in about 2.5 weeks, April 6th to 11th. And it is quite an incredible experience for those who have never sat for a period of time in silence for 5 nights in 5.5 days with people. And it's a place, a place to really deepen your practice and maybe get a split-second glimpse of some of the things that Noah talked about. It's taught by a wonderful team of Eric Colvig and Arena Weissman, a lesbian and a gay man, who have done it for many, many years. And so it's coming up, and there are still spaces, and it's a sliding scale, and there are scholarships available for people who can't afford it. So if you're interested, spiritrock.org is the website, and many of us have done it over the years from this Sangha, and it's really indescribable to go on a long retreat like that. So I hope people will consider it.
Thanks. Okay.
Yes, I'm the host this morning, and there will be some refreshments served. So please enjoy refreshment and tea, and socialize with other members. When you have tea, please wash your cups and put them down. That's the rule here. And also we have a Danable out there. Please put $5.
Minimum.
Or minimum. It's a guideline. If you can put more, by all means, please do so. If you cannot, put in whatever you can. But that definitely supports our activities here. It's very, very important. And finally, there might be a group of people who will go out and have lunch together. So toward the end of the social hour, if you're interested, let me know, and I'll try to find who are going. Thank you.
Yes.
At the Asian Art Museum, there's a Thai artist who is a Buddhist whose name is Woodma, who has done a wonderful exhibition of impermanence and Buddhist-inspired graphics and a couple of installation features for the video, which is out of sight. It's 23 minutes. And the music that goes with the video will also give you a wonderful glimpse of Buddhist-inspired art.
And also just remind that I do have a group here in San Francisco on Wednesday nights, and you're all welcome to come. For more information about that or any of my teaching schedule stuff, my website is dharmapunx.com, Punx. There's a day-long that I'm teaching at Spirit Rock on May 9th. It's going to look at Buddhism as anti-establishment rebellion. So if you'd like to come and practice for a day, similar to, if you can't make it for the 5-day retreat, but you want to take, 8 hours and sit and walk and do some of this practice in a little bit more of an intense way, please join us for that. And thank you for having me here.
Thank you. We're going to stand and hold hands, and if you could do the metta.
Water here? Yeah, it's water. Okay, so I like the circle. And if we just reflect for a moment on our own practices and intentions for our lives, maybe be reminded that the Buddha said, perhaps he said anyways, that we could search all realms of existence, the whole world over and over, and never find another being more worthy of our love, of our care, of our understanding. No being's more worthy than oneself. May we each remember that, to care and love and respect ourselves. And remember the flip side of that, which is that there's no beings that are less worthy of our love or care or respect either. So may any merit from our practice go out in all directions, touching all beings everywhere, bringing more happiness and peace and understanding to this crazy world, alleviating some of the confusion. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.